Well, hello chaps, and welcome back to DTH Reviews. Today, we are talking about Shadow of Mordor.
Yeah, beautiful.
Do you like that? Actually, First of all, let's say that introduction was horrible, because me, being terrible, I can't roll my R's. So, Jamison, would you do the honors and introduce this game properly?
No, you nailed it.
No, come on.
Shadow of Mordor.
There you go. That's stunning. There you go. There's all the likes.
Roll the R's, yeah.
Yeah. So I've actually written a tiny little opening segment here because I didn't really know how to start Shadow of Mordor because it has a lot of stuff going on. So I've said here, Shadow of Mordor is an open world action game with elements inspired by Assassin's Creed, the Arkham series, and with a unique AI system, which I think kind of summarizes it well because I had no idea how to start it. It has a lot of stuff going on inside it, Shadow of Mordor. But where do you want to start, man? Yeah, as I said.
Let's get the small things out of the way. Let's leave gameplay, which means combat, traversal, and AI for later. Let's get story out of the way. It's a small thing. It
is a small thing, yeah. So the opening's interesting.
Oh, the opening's terrible.
No spoilers, but no spoilers. But it opens. I liked the opening cutscene and the opening introduction.
Yeah.
It was a bit more gritty and
it was
dark
effective.
than I expected. It was effective, yeah. So the story kind of opens with you being cursed to never die. That is kind of the opening segment. You are kind of stuck in between worlds, and you are kind of matched up with another guy who is also in the same situation. And no spoilers, you go into this kind of, I don't know what to call him.
He's a wraith.
Kind of a wraith. Okay, there you go. And I really enjoyed, again, no spoilers, I enjoyed his backstory.
Yes.
I thought that was one of the most interesting parts of the story, was finding out about this guy, because he's actually quite connected to the Lord of the Rings lore.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't expecting. So, you go around, you find out this guy's past, because it helps you progress with the story, because you basically just kind of break the curse. I guess you can die and be... Actually, I can't say that. Yeah, just so you can die, I guess.
Yeah, well, there's the main guy, the dude, Talion.
Yeah.
And he just wants to get revenge, I think. And then there's the Wraith. And the Wraith's backstory is definitely the most interesting part of the story. And it does take a fairly... it's fairly focused on his backstory for a good part of the story, which I liked. And yeah, it was interesting learning about him. He's pretty key, like you said. And then all the stuff with Talion it's fine. It doesn't really... Like... all the stuff that's not dealing with the Wraith's backstory is totally serviceable. It gets the job done, the story in the game. There's some weird, like, forced references, or, I don't know if references is the right word. I mean, it is a friggin' Mordor, like, Middle-earth game, so they're referencing Middle-earth. But, like, Gollum just shows up for, like, 3 missions and then disappears.
That was
which was a little weird. And there's some kind of forced dialogue that's referencing more of the popular lines, like from the book or movies or whatever. Like there's one bit in the story where the Wraith just says, "Fly, you fool," just like, and it's like, oh, okay. And there was another bit, I don't know if you got to it, where he says, "There can only be one Lord of the Ring." And it's just like, oh,
just great.
Yeah. So there's a couple of little moments like that. It's kind of like, oh, okay, guys, yeah, we know it's a Lord of the Rings game. I got it.
They do attempt a little bit of humor. There's a few characters that are in there for some laughs.
Yeah, and I was surprised at how totally fine the story stuff was. It wasn't amazing, but it was not terrible, and it got the job done just fine, I think.
Yeah, I would put it on par with stuff like Assassin's Creed. It adds context, and it kind of gives you a reason from go to point. But, I wasn't tearing up over any moments in it or gasping.
No.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Except for the opening. Gross, horrible. I have written down casual throat slicing is the worst, and it is.
Yeah.
I think another thing we should get out of the way quickly is it's an open world game. The open world isn't very big or interesting.
No, it's not.
It's sort of just you're inside Mordor, which is like this big, it's sort of a shitty place. It's just not very flat or not very hilly. It's not green for the most part. Yeah, the world, you can get around from one end to the other in like 3 minutes. You haul ass.
I actually quite liked that it was small, though.
I did too, yeah, don't get me wrong. It's not really a complaint.
You would see like a point on the other end of the map, and it was like 400 meters. You're like, oh god, here we go. And then you'll just be sprinting along. You're like, oh, I'm here. Okay, that's nice.
It was nice, yeah. So it's there are 2 areas, and they're they're both sort of the same size, and which is not very big, and that's fine. I was totally fine by that.
Yeah, me too.
Is there anything else we should quickly get out of the way?
Do you want to get like traversal and movement?
Yeah, I think we should get, because this game really is a gameplay game first and foremost. I think, yeah, to start off, they throw a whole lot of stuff at you.
Yeah,
when you first
it's going to be my only complaint about the whole game, really, is that the first 2 hours, I think I might have even suffered more than you. I was completely lost, because it's like an open world game. There is a lot of mechanics. Every open world game has a lot of mechanics in it. You know, by the end of the game, the minimap is usually cluttered with like icons and stuff. But I think other games have done a better job of slowly implementing them. Where in this game, there is stuff as you go along, but there's a ton of stuff in the first hour. And I was like, okay, so I need to get this currency to unlock rune slots, but then I get runes from killing this guy. And then if I kill this guy, I get power, which then unlocks a tier of abilities, but I can't actually unlock the abilities until I get XP. I'm not making it up. It is actually completely true what I just said. That is what you have to do. So, yeah, I did panic a bit because I don't think you played Assassin's Creed 3, did you?
No.
But the main thing it suffered from is it had too much stuff in it that didn't really do anything, and it was too complicated. I didn't know how stuff was connected. And Assassin's Creed 3 was just kind of a mess. And I kind of panicked that Shadow of Mordor was going to suffer from that. But no, it was okay. Everything had its place. It just took like a good 2 to 3 hours to really get to grips with everything.
Yeah. There's a fine line, I think, for open world games. Like, I think Assassin's Creed, for the most part, spends too much time introducing all this stuff, especially after you've played one game. It's like Assassin's Creed 4, you know, I know how to climb, I know how to fight, and it takes, you know, 3 hours to get through the sort of tutorial stuff. But there is also, you know, Mordor, they throw you into the deep end, and it was a little rough, I think, the first 2 hours. And it sort of feels like necessary almost, because we'll get to the Nemesis system in a bit, but like, you have to die to get that ball rolling. But like, just the number of icons on the map, like every single collectible shows up on the map from the first minute you're on the map. And there are story missions and side missions and artifacts and war chiefs wandering around and upgrades and combat upgrades and sword upgrades and runes and power. And yeah, it's the first 3 hours are a little daunting, and that it definitely, it might actually even turn some people off, you know, in the first 2 hours, where you just have no idea how to really play, and you don't have some of the higher level upgrades which make things way easier, and it could be frustration for some people, I think. But,
yeah, I agree.
But once you get
through, though.
Yeah, once you get through those first 3 hours, it is a delight.
It is a delight. So we go into quickly just tackle movement.
Yeah, there's 3. There's like traversal, combat, and the Nemesis system, really, I think. So yeah, traversal.
It's pretty much Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
You press X, and you push forward, and then you climb whatever you want to climb. I actually found it a bit more comfortable than Assassin's Creed. I think Assassin's Creed likes to implement almost a bit of strategy. I wouldn't say puzzling, but like if you're climbing a big building in Assassin's Creed, you have to look where you're going to jump next and like kind of figure out. This game, you just push forward next and you climb whatever, and it's fluid, and you're at the top of a building without really trying. Yeah. And also, you can jump off anything from any height, and your little wraith friend kind of just helps you land, which is nice. That was a nice little thing. Not having to worry about fighting hail bales was a nice little addition. Yeah,
I think Assassin's Creed, the traversal is mighty fine, and like you said, the sort of almost like pseudo-puzzly stuff is great, but the number of times in every Assassin's Creed game, you know, I've spent how many hours playing Assassin's Creed, I still will be on a building and mean to jump this way, and he jumps completely to the right, and I fall to my death, and it's like...
Yeah, it happens every game.
That is not a problem in this game, because you just jump off from anywhere, and you get this really cool little flip, and you land on your knees or whatever, like a badass, and you keep on running. And so yeah, it's like Assassin's Creed, but forgiving, or more forgiving than Assassin's Creed. And yeah, it's Assassin's Creed, but easier and kinder, which is good. I think that's a good thing. Assassin's Creed
it works.
Knows what it's doing.
Exactly.
And then the big thing is the combat, really.
That's the main bit, yeah.
The combat is Batman, but with swords.
Yeah.
And
pretty much,
it's phenomenal, I think. A lot of games have tried to do Batman combat, including Arkham Origins, which I played a few hours of, even it didn't feel like it nailed the Batman combat, which is weird, but different developer. But there's been lots of games that have tried to do Batman post-Batman, and none of them have done it quite as well. I would say this does it absolutely as well, but it might even be more satisfying than Batman because it is so savage and brutal, and there's so much just like decapitation and viciousness in all of the fighting that it makes for an even more enjoyable experience, I think.
I think it also shares some similarities with Assassin's Creed, where it's almost split into 3 sections. We have the sword, you have the bow, which is for your long-range stuff, and then you have the dagger. So there is also some stealth stuff you can implement into the combat as well, which brings a nice little variety. And it's very easy to get to grips with, because we played like goddamn 7 Assassin's Creed games. You played 3 Arkham games, I played 2 of them, so...
I could practically play the combat in Arkham or in this with my eyes closed, just like, okay, XX, B, BX at the same time, this, you just, all the button combos and everything are almost exactly the same, and that's, again, it's a good thing, it's taking really good things from really good games and doing them just as well, maybe even better. So
yeah, there's a reason it worked for like 7 games in the Assassin's Creed series and for 3 games now in the Arkham series, or 2. Let's be taking out Origins.
Almost.
But there's a reason it's worked for like 10 games and people aren't complaining about it. It's because it's a good system. It almost feels like, I don't know, it's almost like a button sequence where you got to counter this guy, then you got to dodge this guy, and you got to stun this guy.
Yeah.
And you can only do specific attacks to specific people. And when you are surrounded by a lot of guys, sometimes it's strategic to flee and to regroup and maybe take a different approach. But it's very satisfying to just sit there and really, really concentrate and just stare at the screen and get every button combination right and get like a 50-hit combo. It's very satisfying. Yeah, it just works.
It does, and the higher level upgrades that you get as you get further into the game really make the combat even more fun and easier as well. Like you can get the hit streak reduced down to 5, or the shadow strike with the bow. You can, I don't know if you got this one where you can chain executions just endlessly.
Oh,
that one's fantastic. There's just a whole bunch, combat executions and yeah, the combat is just, Batman combat is amazing and a ton of fun, and this is just as good. But this like absolute brutality of it never gets old for me. Like every time I boot it up and just jump into combat, brutal, it's like, oh my god, this game is really brutal and it's fantastic. yeah.
And I think what I was saying before, like the stealth, the bow, and the sword, it works very well together. It creates very like kind of dynamic and mixed up combat and keeps it interesting. Like it's fun, kind of like sneaking around, taking out a few guys with a dagger, like jumping up a building and doing a stealth assassination. The dagger and the stealth stuff is very, very close to Assassin's Creed. I can do ledge grabs and bush takedowns from that stuff. But then you get into the sword fighting, and you'll be in a fort, and then one guy's trying to go off and set the beacon off, and then you pull out a bow and just take him out and continue with your sword. It's fun when you put it all together and chain all this stuff, and yeah, it creates some fun, dynamic combat, and you never get bored of it. I didn't anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I have not gotten bored at all of it. I just want to keep playing it because it is just a ton of fun to play.
Yeah.
So the big thing, like, all of this is fine if it just came out like this with good traversal, good combat, a fine open world. It would have been a totally solid game, I think. It's a ton of fun to play. It looks good, but the Nemesis system is what makes it unique and what really sets it apart, I think, from just about everything else that's come out. It's It's essentially like a sort of chess game, AI, dynamic power political system that is in the game.
Yeah, it really is.
It's tricky to explain. It's way easier, like, as you are looking at the review. If you don't know what it is, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. So basically, when you start out, you have, like, you can see, like, the ranks of, are they orcs? Oryx? What's the Lord of the Ring term for it? Let's just
those
go
are both valid.
Okay, so you have the captains, and then the captains are kind of below the ranks of the war chiefs. And then you start with just basically a list of them, and they're all silhouetted, they're all black, you can't see them. And to unlock their locations and their strengths and their weaknesses, you have to get intel. And intel is dotted around the map. It can be found in a few ways. The most common way is to find a specific orc. I think they're called worms. And then you get them on their own, and you interrogate them, and you can pick from the roster, and you can say, I want to know where this guy is and what his strengths and weaknesses are. And there's more ways to get intel, but like the main purpose is you kind of have to prepare yourself for these battles, because you can go against the captains whenever you want. You will randomly bump into some you aren't prepared for. That's how, you know, dynamic and random it is. But the smart thing to do is to go out your way, find intel, pick specifically what captain you want to go after. And it gets more and more complicated as the game goes on, because eventually you go to war chiefs, and war chiefs have bodyguards. So you want to know the intel for the bodyguards before you go in to attack the war chiefs. And it just, you're right, it is hard to describe.
Yeah.
It sounds like absolute mumbo jumbo. But it's basically, the game gives you an opportunity to really prepare yourself for battle. Whenever you go in against these like mini, I guess you call them mini bosses,
yeah,
you can be fully equipped, you can know all the weaknesses, or you can just be a bit mental and dive in and just kind of hope that you do okay. And it is possible to go against captains and even war chiefs unprepared, but it's probably going to be a much more stressful experience and not as satisfying, because when you uncover a captain's weakness, you can literally dispose of them in like one hit sometimes, from a ranged bow to a stealth finisher, and it's very satisfying to just kind of get all these guys' weaknesses down, go in and take them all out without anyone knowing you're even there. Does that kind of...
Yeah.
It's tricky, you're right.
It is, and it's
quite a complicated system.
The AI also has a memory, essentially, and so depending on, like, sometimes you'll kill them and they'll come back to life, but sometimes you'll encounter one and, like, you'll run away because you are low on health or whatever, and you're just like, I can't fucking deal with this guy right now, I am out of here. And then next time you run across him, he'll taunt you, basically, and be like, oh yeah, you're the one that ran away, oh, let's go, I'll kill you now. And the AI basically remembers all of its interactions with you, which is really neat, and it makes for like a really, it feels like it's been really tailored and personalized to exactly how each person plays it. And there's a great variety of captains, you know, visuals, names, and abilities are all, there's just probably like 3 big piles of random, you know, aspects, and they just mix and match them all, and you get a huge variety of them. Looking through all of your footage, I've never seen any orc that has the exact same name or look or weaknesses or a bit, you know, as any orc that I've encountered, and I'd imagine that it's very different, like your, you know, who your captains are and your relationship with all those captains is completely different from mine, which is it's super neat, and it's exactly what I want from a next-gen game. You know, you talk about like next-gen and you think like, of course things are going to look better, but one of the first things that I always think about could be great with new consoles is AI systems. Like the first Assassin's Creed was a great example. It had, you know, huge crowds and was really exciting because it was so early in the console, and now this comes out and it's AI systems that aren't possible on last gen and are very new and unique, and it makes the game feel like a huge surprise, and it feels completely unlike anything else that I've ever played before, and that's definitely fantastic.
And we only just like scratched on the Nemesis system. Like there's a whole other section
we're
gonna leave because it's fun to go into it not knowing it's coming.
Totally.
But you could basically I'm not gonna say, but you can kind of later on in the game, you can
influence things.
You can influence things to go against other things. It's really, really cool.
It was really surprising. I had no idea it was in there, so I think it is a good idea to sort of leave it out. Yeah, it's the sort of second half.
I think you mentioned, but whenever an orc or a captain kills you, they will get promoted and rise in power, so they get harder every time you fail to kill them, and then you want them. It says revenge target on their head, so you kind of go out your way to get your revenge on these guys. And there was also some cool moments where I was playing and 2 captains would just kill each other. I wasn't even doing anything. I was just running around and it would just say on the screen, this captain has died, and then you go to the battle report and you'll see this captain get promoted, he's overthrown another captain, and that was completely out of your control. So it's moments like that that kind of make it feel, I don't know, really alive and dynamic. And it was it
feels like the game world is working when you're not nearby.
Without you.
Yeah.
Which is really neat.
Yeah. And I wrote down it is coming out on the last gen, the 360 and the PS3 in a couple weeks. Excuse me. And the Nemesis system is not present in those versions. So there's a totally solid, very fun to play open world game there. But without the Nemesis system, you're missing basically the best part of the game. So if you don't have new consoles, wait and get this on the new consoles, because the 360 and PS3 versions, I just, you know, the Nemesis system is essentially what makes it so cool. So not having that, no thanks. What else? There's a few I have written down here. There are a lot of really cool little stylistic flourishes, I think is the best way. Like when I really like when you zoom in on an orc, or when you first or on a captain, or when you first come across him, the wraith guy says his name. You know, you just zoom on this like hideous orc, and he just says Ishmaz, and you're like, okay, yeah, you're going down, Ishmaz. And then I also really like when you grab an orc or a captain or whatever, the worms, when you grab one of them to gain intel, and the wraith is like yelling at them that he's going to invade their mind. They look so freaked out. They, like, their eyes are like, oh god, and it's just a really great little thing that I really like. It's just little things like that add up.
Like when the war chief walks in, it's like guys do.
Yeah, and they sometimes chant their name in the music, and that's like, really cool. Yeah,
and they walk in with their bodyguards. You're terrified, man. You're like, oh shit, I don't have their intel. I'm gonna die here. Yeah,
and it's just little things like that give it a little bit of extra style, and they go a long ways, and I really like them. Yeah, we should probably wrap it up, I guess.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that we haven't talked about, but that's the thing about open world games. It's probably best to leave some for you guys to discover on your own. So yeah, it was surprising to me. I don't know, it kind of crept up quite quietly. But I think there is so much coming out in October and November, so many loud games to be hyped about.
Yeah.
Shadow of Mordor, I was like, I'll give it a go. I haven't played a good Lord of the Rings game in a while, and I was really surprised about how good it was. Man, I think the most exciting thing about it is the fact, you mentioned it earlier, that next gen is really pushing AI. I know we have Alien Isolation coming up, so we can talk more about advanced AI in that review, but it's exciting. It really is exciting to see what companies can do with this consoles, and I think AI is going to be a big thing to look out for in future games. Yeah, you conclude, and then we're both right.
Sure, yeah, I think around E3, like when a bunch of people got to play it at E3, they said like, wow, this game's really awesome. I sort of like saw that and said, okay, I'm going to not pay any attention to this game at all, because if it comes out and is shit, then I'm not disappointed, and if it comes out and is amazing, then it's a great surprise. And that's basically what it was. Like I really wanted it to be good, but I wasn't getting excited for it because I wanted there have been so many disappointments this year. And this is not a disappointment at all. It is like the most fun to play game I think I've played this whole year. Just in combat, traversal, AI, it is top-notch, superb. I'm really curious to see how I like Assassin's Creed Unity after playing this with such great combat and traversal.
Yeah, it has a bit of a rival now to live up to.
I would say so, yeah. So, what are you gonna rate it?
I'm gonna give it 5 stars.
As am I. Yeah.
It's a superb game. It's really, really solid, fun game. There's very little. We haven't moaned. We moan a lot as well in some of these reviews, and there's really not much that you can pick apart from this game. I think the only complaint we had is that it was a bit rough to get into, but once you get into it, it's just one of the best experiences this year. Yeah, I totally agree. It's really superb from top to bottom. So yeah, if you haven't given it a go, it's definitely one to get out of the way before the November haul comes in and takes all your wallet money away. Yeah, but that's all. So thank you guys for listening, and we will be back soon with some more reviews. It's going to get busy, but that's all for now. So bye! Why is that my outro now? Never my outro.